So I just wanted to start this message with a simple question, and that is, how many of you have been hurt by relationships, or friendships, or partnerships? If I were to do a survey right now and say, raise your hand if you've been hurt by a relationship, friendship, or partnership, everybody would raise their hands and their feet and your toes, because we've all been. For the only ones who would not raise their hands would be those who are too young to be hurt, but unfortunately, it's only a matter of time before it happens. So with this in mind, though, we're starting a brand new series. And let me ask this question. What if you could minimize the amount of hurt or pain that you would experience in your relationships? How many of you would go for that? Like, again, if we were to do a survey, I think we would all raise our hands for that. We would love to minimize. Now, unfortunately, we can't eliminate pain. We just can't, because we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have our shortcomings. But what we can do is we can minimize the amount of pain that we experience in our relationships, in our friendships, and in our partnerships. So before we start diving into talking about love, I wanted to get some opinions from experts to see what they think about love. So here's the one that I wanted to read to you. I love this one. When my grandmother got arthritis, she couldn't bend over and paint her toenails anymore. So my grandfather does it for her all the time, even when his hands got arthritis too. That's love. So that's from Rebecca, who's 8 years old. Now, with this in mind, this is an article called, What Do Kids Think About Love? So I wanted to read some of the other quotes to you because I thought they were great. Here's another one. Love is when you kiss all the time. Then when you get tired of kissing, you still want to be together and you talk more. My mommy and daddy are like that, but they look gross when they kiss. So that's Emily, who's age 8. Here's Noelle, age 7. Love is when you tell a guy you like his shirt and then he wears it every day. Love that one. I love this. This is probably my favorite one. This is by Regina, who says, I'm not rushing into love. I'm finding the 4th grade hard enough. Right? I'm finding the 4th grade hard enough. And many of us will say, amen, Regina. It's not just the 4th grade, it's life. I'm finding life hard enough. Because, again, here's the truth, is when it comes to pain, because if we were to ask, like, how do kids get these opinions about love, really, we just have to look in the mirror. They just see it in us. So is there a way that we can lay a foundation that would allow our kids to have the healthiest perspective about love that's possible? And I think the answer to that is yes. However, when we talk about pain and we talk about trials, here's the truth when it comes to that, is some of us, because of pain, what we've done is we've shut down. And we've said, never again, never again, never again will I be hurt, never again will I put myself in that position. And so what we do is we put a wall around ourselves to protect ourselves so that we don't get hurt. Or we go to the other extreme and we become codependent. Will you love me? 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 Oh, you love me. And then we latch on to that person, trying to get every ounce of love that we can get from them. So we see that that's not healthy either. So how do we get to that place of being healthy? So that's why we're talking about next level love. I wanted to share with you the theme verse for this passage. And you find that in Philippians chapter 2, verses 4 through 5. It says, don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. So here's the truth. One of the reasons why we find ourselves in trouble when it comes to relationships is we tend to look out at relationships from the perspective of doing what is best for us. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It just has to be balanced. We don't want to completely ignore our needs, but we also want to look at what do we have to offer in building a great relationship as well. And so that's what we're going to be looking at over the course of this series, is how to build that foundation. Now, I found a model that I thought was really great, and we're going to use this model for this course of this series. It's called the relationship attachment model, and you can see an example on your screen. So what you see is you see know, you see trust, you see rely, you see commit, and touch. Those are going to be each of the messages over the course of this series. And so today, we're actually going to talk about no. So you can see that on your screen. You'll see that go up. And so what happens is think about all of those little blue things. You know how on your stereo, you have a fader, and you turn it up, and you turn it down, you turn it up, and you turn it down. So think of each one of these as a fader. And so what you want to do is you want to turn the fader up for no. Now, why is this so important? Because that's the foundation. If you look at this series, if you look at these, it's actually the progression of a relationship. So the very base, the very foundation of the relationship is no. And then you want to build trust, and then you want to build a reliance on that person, and then a commitment, and then touch. So keep this in mind, because I'm going to share something that may help explain why you've experienced such pain in your life before. Look at this next one. You'll see that touch goes up. Now, touch can symbolize the sexual relationship. Now, here's a problem. Where's the touch at? You see touch is really high, and you see no is non-existent. So what happens then when you begin to invest in a sexual relationship with someone without knowing that person? You know what you're doing? Is you're setting yourself up for pain. And many of you who are watching this, you go, oh, Ken, that's me. That's so right on. That's been the experience that I've had in my life. And so this is why it's so important that what we want you to understand is when God says save yourself for marriage, what he's doing is he's giving you the opportunity to protect your heart. It's to help you hopefully get to a point where you don't experience touch in a sexual way until you really know the person. And hopefully you'll know the person when you say I do, which happens to be a caveat. If it's a 2-week relationship, it's probably gone very quickly, and you really haven't had a chance to get to know that person. But that's one way that we experience pain. Here's another example of a way that we experience pain. You see how the rely meter has gone up? But what do you see about no? You see that no is still low, it's still off, it's still non-existent. So you relied on someone before you know them. And how many of us have experienced that kind of pain? You think you can rely on this person, and you put your trust in them, you put your reliance upon them. And then what happens, and you won't know this until you go through something really difficult or something really hard, and you begin to lean on that person for being there. And then when you lean on them because you think they're going to be there, they're not. And what's the reason why? It's because the truth is you really don't know them. And what you thought you had, you really don't have, because you can't rely on that person. So when you look at this, as you look at this, you go, oh, that makes sense. So that's why, like, if I commit to someone before I know them, or if I trust someone before I know them, I can see how that would open up the door for pain to happen in my life. So as you can see from this next one, that's what we're going to focus on today, is we're going to focus on what it means to know someone. And so with that in mind, here is our main thought for today, and it's simply this: commit to knowing the person before growing the relationship. Commit to knowing the person before growing the relationship. So now here's the question. Well, all that is great, Ken. How do I really get to know someone? How do I do that? Well, here's the first step. Invest time. Invest time. See, I think sometimes, especially when we really want to be involved in a relationship, what we do is we can proceed in the relationship fairly quickly. And I get it. When your biological clock is tick, 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 ticking, I understand that pressure to want to be with someone. But what happens is if you listen to your biological clock tick, tick, ticking and get involved in a relationship, what's going to happen is your heart is going to be hurting. Because again, you would have short-circuited the process of really being able to get to know someone. There's actually this thing that they've been talking about lately. It's called the 90-day challenge. You may not have heard of this before, but basically what the 90-day challenge says is wait 90 days before you have sex with someone. Now, of course, biblically, we would say wait until you're married to have sex with someone, but the principle behind the 90 days, I understand. The idea behind the 90-day challenge is to give yourself an opportunity to really be able to get to know someone before reaching certain levels of your relationship. That's the idea of the 90-day challenge. Love the idea, but again, when you allow yourself to get sexual with someone that you really don't know. And the truth is, even when you get married, there's still going to be things that you learn and that you discover about that person. But at least this way, you have given yourself more time to really get to know. Now, here's the truth. If someone says that they're not willing to wait to get to know you before having sex with you, then here's the truth. That person is not the right person for you. And I know you're saying, but Ken, come on, Ken. Come on, I've been waiting for so long. That person is still not the right person for you. You have to be willing to give yourself time. As difficult and as hard as it can be, give yourself time for you to be able to do that. I found this quote, and I thought this quote was great. It says, it's from a thing called Time on Your Side. It says, your mind, body, and heart can play tricks on you, on top of the tricks and mind games that the other person may be playing. So what you may think is attraction or even love may end up being infatuation. By not waiting, you can end up making all kinds of decisions that you may regret in the end. So again, that's from an article called Time on Your Side. So why not take your time? Why not? I mean, we're talking about a lifetime commitment possibly. And just think, this not only applies to relationships and dating, it also applies to friendships. Before someone becomes your best friend, make sure you give them that time. Before someone becomes a business partner, don't rush into a business partnership with someone without really knowing them. So give yourself time. Now, what is it that you're trying to give yourself time to do? Is really you're giving yourself time to get to know their weaknesses. You're giving yourself time to get to know their struggles. What if we had the same criteria that God used for picking relationships or for picking people? For example, it says in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7, but the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. But the Lord looks at the heart. So the Lord looks at the inward qualifications of that person. Now, again, I get the idea of being attracted to someone. I get the idea of seeing things of someone, that physical attraction, that initial look. I get that. But if we use that as a premise for a relationship, we can get in trouble. There's a story of a guy who does that. In Judges chapter 14, verses 1 and 2, it says, one day Samson was in Timnah. One of the Philistine women caught his eye. When he returned home, he told his father and mother, a young Philistine woman in Timnah caught my eye, and I want to marry her. Get her for me. As a young Philistine woman. In other words, a young Philistine hottie has caught my eye. Go get her for me. And back then, it was different, like in biblical times. So if you wanted to marry someone, your parents were involved in the process of picking the right person for you and helping you pick the right person and getting that relationship started. I wouldn't mind going back to biblical times, but I can see now my kids are going, no way, Mom and Dad. But I wouldn't mind going back to that time, at least being involved in the process. But there was something about, so I don't have time to go into this story, but let me just tell you, this whole thing about Samson in this moment is driven by one thing. It's driven by sight. And eventually, this becomes such a mess for him that by the time he is done, you know what happens? Is the woman ends up marrying someone in the wedding party, and not Samson. That's how much of a mess this becomes. So this is why, and this is really important, and I really want you to lean in. This is why it's so important that you make a commitment that before you get involved or progress too far in a relationship, that you want to get to know the person. And how do you know when you know someone? You know that you know them when you know their struggles, when you know their weaknesses, when you know how they handle conflict. When you know all of those things, and now you have the opportunity to be able to make the decision, like, is this something that I want to be involved with for the rest of my life? Now, friendships may be different, depending upon what it is. You could be a friend with someone that has struggles, but you still have to be careful. Business partnership, you need to be careful with that. Do you want to enter into a business partnership with someone who's had bankruptcy? I don't know, that's something to think about. who's had multiple failures in the business? I don't know. That's something to think about. But that's something that you want to find out before you enter into a business partnership. Same thing. Do you want to enter into a relationship? How many of us have seen people that have, like you meet that person, and they walk in and, hey, this is my new boyfriend, and you just look at me, you go, ooh, that boy's a dog. Like you can see it. But for some reason, they are blind to it. And the reason why is because they really haven't given themselves time to really get to know that person and get to know their weaknesses. So that's what you want to do. How do you know if you know them? Do you know their struggles? And then once you know what their struggles are, then you can decide. Because there's certain traits that we have that are just a struggle. Like one of my traits is laziness. I wrestle with that. It's something I'm still trying to work through, but that's something that I have to be aware of. So it's one of those things, and it's something that unfortunately, that was part of the package deal that I brought in with my marriage. And my wife, she'll tell you. I just hope she doesn't amen too loud. But she can tell you that that's one of the struggles that I have. But when you go through and you really get to know all those elements, so what do? I think it's important to maybe start asking some tough questions. Start asking some tough questions. And as you begin to dig through those questions, and if you're not in a place where you can ask those tough questions, then the truth is you probably shouldn't be dating that person or be friends with that person or be business partners with that person. If you can't ask questions like, what are the skeletons in your closet that could potentially haunt us later? I can be a part of this relationship later that I need to be aware of. If you can't ask about some of your past relationships and why did they fail, some of your past friendships and why did they fail, your past disappointments. Like if you can't have those conversations about hard things, then I would say wait until you can and don't date until you can. Invest time. It says in Philippians chapter 2, verse 2, then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose. How do you get to one mind and purpose? That is an opportunity to connect, to discuss, have conversations, weigh things out, and then from there, you can begin to see like, hey, are we really one mind in this way? Are we really one purpose in this way? Can our one-mindedness overcome your challenges and my challenges? And it's important to look at all those other elements and make sure that we have that in mind as we are looking at being able to move forward in our relationships. Now, I also want to encourage you, it's not just time. Have you guys ever heard the saying, time heals all wounds? Have you heard that saying? Yeah, that's a lie from the pit of hell. It doesn't heal all wounds. Sometimes time can make wounds worse. It's focused time that can heal all wounds. So I want to encourage you, when we're talking about time, we're talking about focused time that you invest. My wife and I, we went to Chili's a long time ago, and we were hanging out, and we had the orange blossom, or the onion blossom. Have you guys had that? The onion, oh my goodness, it's just, my mouth is watering just think about it. But it's just onion goodness. So we had the onion blossom, we were sitting down, and we were, talking, and I look over, and there's this guy with his son. And I can tell you here's what was happening, is the son was here, and the guy was here. Neither one were interacting with one another. And he can go out and say, hey, I spent time with my son today. Did you? Did you? We're talking about focused time. So here's what I want to encourage you, because this is important. Let's say you want to have a great relationship with your family or in your family. Learn how to spend focused time together. I'll tell you, one of my favorite days of the week, honestly, is Saturday nights. I love Saturday nights. And here's the reason why. On Saturday evenings, it's the time where my family gets together. We turn off the television. We're in the living room. We'll have our phones because we use the Bible app on our phones. And we'll read the Bible together, or we'll do devotionals together, and then we'll talk about them. And we'll talk about how it connects and relates to life. I'll tell you, that's one of the most valuable days of the week to me. I absolutely adore Saturday nights because what happens is I get to see and hear the hearts of my kids. Sometimes they say things that are so incredibly insightful. Sometimes they'll say things about their challenge. My wife, same thing as well. She'll talk about her week and what's going on with her life and things that she's learning and growing and developing. And what's really cool is sometimes you'll hear things that are really brilliant, but then also you will hear moments where my kids will share their heart. There's just something about that quality time that you spend together. So I want to encourage you to make a commitment to really invest in that. Just because you're with someone on a date, if they pick up the phone more than look at you in the eye, that's it. That's not the right person, because that's not focused time. It doesn't give you the opportunity to really be able to get to know them. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want to encourage you to have a bag. And in that bag, what you do is you put all cell phones, ringers off, on silence, in the bag. Just do that. Unless you're using the Bible app on your phone. Of course, that's different. But do that. Now, I'll tell you, if you're doing with this as a family, if you say to your kids, especially if they're teenagers, like, hey, turn off your phones, put them in the bag, we're going to have time to hang out and talk as a family. They might be like, no. You're like, no, Mom and Dad. We're like, no, it's the worst thing. And also, when they do that, they might go through like tics, going through withdrawal from not being able to use their phone. And you actually might go through some withdrawals for not being able to be on your phone as well. But you know what happens? Is initially, when you start these conversations, they're really awkward. But as time goes along, you begin to know one another. You begin to connect with each other. You begin to share stories with one another. Your lives will begin to really speak to each other as well. So again, commit to knowing the person before growing the relationship. It says in Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take interest in others too. So here's one of the things that I think is really important, is not only do you want to invest time, but you also want to act on what you learn. Act on what you learn. So with this in mind, because there's a part of us that innately knows that time is so important. But also there's a part of us that also needs to be aware that when we see red flags, we may want to act on that. And maybe it might be time for us to take a step back or distance ourselves and be able to know, like, is this the kind of thing that I can really push through or really tolerate? Or act on it. Maybe I see some really great qualities in that person because of spending time with them. And so I want to begin to move forward and progress in the relationship. And maybe as you're digging into, find out how is it that person is wired. Find out what is it that they need, how it is that they grow, and find out like the inner workings of that person and what it is that combines to make them them. And then begin to act on that. I wanted to share something with you, and I love this. It says in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33. So again, I say, each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So what is that saying? You know the number one need of a woman is love? Is to know that she's loved and cherished. And the number one need of a man is to be respected. There was a survey that was done, and they asked men, they said, if you had a choice, would you rather spend the rest of your life alone and unloved or disrespected and insignificant? And a vast majority of the men said alone and unloved. And then what they did is they asked women the same exact question. Would you rather spend the rest of your life alone and unloved or disrespected and insignificant? And what they found is a majority of women said disrespected and insignificant. Why? Because their number one need is love. Now, I'm going to share something with you that I thought was really, really interesting. There is this song that many of us are familiar with, and has actually become a song that is an anthem for women. And here it is. R-E-S-P-E-C-T. That's right. Find out what it means to me. That famous Aretha song. And that's become an anthem for women. Did you know that it was actually written by a man? It was written by a guy named Otis Redding. And what happened is he actually wrote this song. He got into an argument with his girlfriend that night. He went home and wrote this song about respect. So literally, this song, although women need to be honored and women need to be respected, there's no doubt about that. Please, I'm not arguing that they should not be. I'm just saying what this song is really about is the heartbeat of a man. However, Aretha does have a song that does connect with the natural need for love of a woman, and it's called Natural Woman. You make me feel like a natural woman. If you go through and if you listen to what she's talking about the heart for love and to be loved that a woman has. So Aretha's knocking it out the park. She's like, I'm covering both. I'm getting men and women. I'm getting them down, you know. But it's just one of those elements that we don't always connect with who we are and what it is that we're struggling with. But yeah, that song was actually written by Otis Redding in response to an argument that he had with his girlfriend. And maybe it didn't work out so well because his next hit was Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. Watching time roll away. So maybe that didn't work out so well for him. But as we look at this, as you get to know someone, act on what it is that you learn. Act on how it is that you can be able to grow. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want to encourage you, if you are dating or if you are married, this week, for those of you that are girlfriends or wives, make a list of 2 or 3 things that you really respect about your husband, and then share them with him. And if he passes out, that's a good sign. He's been needing encouragement for a while. And husbands and boyfriends, I want to encourage you to do the same thing. Write 2 to 3 things that you absolutely adore and love about your wife. And here's the great thing is Valentine's Day is coming, so you can put it in the card and take advantage of that. I'm telling you. See, I hooked you up. Don't worry about it. Ken, I got your back, buddy. I don't know why I did that sign. That's like I'm beating your back. So no, I got your back. We're in this. How about that one? But as we think about this idea, I think it could be something really tremendous in bringing you together as a couple as well. So again, in order to build a great relationship, commit to knowing the person before growing the relationship. And with that, here's the last one. Know where your identity comes from. So the first 2 were about knowing someone else. This one is about knowing you. Knowing you. I'm going to tell you a phrase that I think has wrecked many people. A phrase I think has wrecked many people. It's from the movie Jerry Maguire. And it's not, show me the money. So it's not that one. It's the one where Jerry Maguire has just had this incredible victory. And he's so excited, but then he realizes he doesn't want to have this victory alone. So it shows him he leaves that incredible victory. He's running through the airport, and then he gets to the house, and when he walks into the house, there's all these women that are there, and they are like, at him, and he's like, where's my wife? I am here to see my wife. And then he kind of glances, and he sees her, and he begins this speech. And at the end of the speech, he says, you, that's right, complete me. You complete me. And of course, she responds, you had me at hello. But let me tell you, that line, you complete me, has wrecked so many people. Because here's the truth. No human being has the capacity to complete you. And if you are relying on another person to make you feel complete, to make you feel whole, you are setting yourself up for failure. Here's the thing. One half person decides to get into a relationship with another half person, our friendship with another half person, our partnership with another half person, relying on that person to meet their needs. But one half person getting involved in a relationship with another half person equals a whole mess. That's what it equals, a whole mess. So I want to encourage you to make a commitment and take time to get to know who you are, to get to know your value. It says in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 19, may you experience the love of Christ. Though it is too great to understand fully, then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. God is the one who completes you. He is the one who completes you. He is the one that makes you whole. If you rely on another person, do you know what kind of pressure You're putting on that person. Essentially, here's what you're doing, is you're asking that person to be God for you. Now, I have a problem with that. If my wife asks me to be God for her, here's the issue. I ain't him. I fall far short. And there are moments where my own insecurities, my own shortcomings, my own challenges get in the way. And the truth is, I could never complete my wife. I can never make her whole. I can't. Nor can I rely on her to be that person for me. The only place where I can really find wholeness is in Jesus. So let's turn to Jesus and tell Jesus, you complete me. You complete me. Now, why is it so important for us to turn to Jesus? It says in Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 through 8, though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. Let me tell you, you want to know what your value is? You want to know what your worth is? Your worth is what someone's willing to pay for it. And Jesus says, look, I know your struggles. I know your setbacks. I know your hardships. I know that you're incomplete. So what I will do is I will go to the cross on your behalf, and I will be your completion. I will do that for you. I will do that. So that's the whole point of Jesus going to the cross, so he can open up the door for you to be complete. And once he rose from the dead, it was declared to be so. It was declared to be reality. So make it a point. Know who you are by knowing whose you are. Know who you are by knowing whose you are. I found this quote by a guy named Tim Keller, and I thought this was really great, and you can read it right there on your screen as well. To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us. Completion is found in him. So again, if you want to have a great relationship where you really get to know someone, again, invest time, make it a commitment also to really get to know that person. Invest that time. Also act on what it is that you learn. And finally, get to know who you are. Because here's the truth. Commit to knowing the person before growing the relationship. That really is the secret to having the kind of relationships that will not only magnify your life, but will also begin to minimize your pain. Let's pray. Jesus, I thank you for those who are here, for those who are watching right now, and I just pray that you would use this to speak to their life. Jesus, that you would use it to really touch and draw them to come to know you. That you would use this as a moment to really speak and allow your presence to be made known. And also, Father, I want to pray for anyone who's watching this who has been broken by past relationships, that you will open up the door for healing to happen, for renewal to happen. And all these things we ask in your name. Amen. Okay, so you can hit the end recording.